Hey, welcome back, everybody, to BackTrekking, the podcast where we look back at the real-world inspirations behind classic episodes of Star Trek. I'm one of your hosts. The name is Caliban, and your other host is right here.
Oh, I didn't have an impression prepared.
I don't think I did either.
I'm Gooey Fame, and I hope everyone had a good Halloween. How about that?
Yeah, there you go. It's the stuff that dreams are made of.
That's not bad.
Please. I feel like when I was younger, like a lot of young men and women who think that they're going to be like some comedy star, I had a bunch of impressions. You know, I had like a bag of tricks. And now that's faded, or all the people who I did impressions of aren't famous anymore. So now I have a bunch of like verbal and vocal tics, but none of them. It's like taking a bunch of puzzles, taking some of the pieces out of them and then putting them all together and just like, yeah, make a puzzle. What do you got?
You're like, yeah, this is just how I talk now.
Yeah. I can do a guy that sounds a little bit Italian and he's got a lisp. Or something. It's
interesting you say that, because my familiarity with Humphrey Bogart is mostly through impersonations of him. So
okay, we got to get into that.
Yeah.
We also have to get into the fact that we are part of the Just Enough Trope podcast network. It's home to many shows about your favorite topics like TV shows, films, comic books, movie, games, music, films, all kinds of stuff. And you can find out more by going to Just Enough Trope or following at Just Enough Trope on Twitter. Keep the geek fires burning. This is the second episode that we've recorded in sequence because we are gang taping a bunch of shows out today. So if we're a little punchy, that's why. And I'll tell you right now, we've got a lot to set up here. I'm setting a clock, and when the clock runs out, we're done. No more of these 2-hour shows.
Okay,
I'm not saying it's not fun. I just don't want to punish the audience.
The pressure is on.
And our subject today, both of them really, I could talk about forever. So we want to limit ourselves. Let's get the cream out there. Forget the watery skim milk.
I feel like I've gotten some of my thoughts out about some of this stuff before, so like maybe I can have some new,
just help speed it along a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. All right. Some more of that cream then.
Yes.
I don't know what's happening. So let's get into what we're talking about. But actually, hold up. Before we get into what we're talking about, we'll talk about a little bit of news from the world of Trek.
Ooh.
Except not really. I mean, there isn't a lot of news from the world of Trek right now. I'm going to give Alex Kurtzman a compliment. I know. Write it down. It's a new holiday. I think for a guy who can't write movies and definitely can't direct movies, he might be a pretty good TV producer. Or whatever his role is on this Star Trek. You know, he's sort of like the guy that oversees everything. Because he always gets asked these questions by people, and they're the kind of, leading questions that you would get, you know, what shows are coming next? What about a movie? Where's Quentin Tarantino at? And he's really good at answering these questions. And if it's not just an act and he takes this sort of even-handedness, this self-control back to the writer's room, then, you know, I think that's good. Like somebody asked him like, oh, are you going to do a Discovery movie? And he had a really great answer. He was like, you know, we are kind of doing our own thing right now. It's really working. We've got this sort of 5-year plan. If you were going to do something in a movie, it would have to be very different than what we're trying to do. So maybe we'll get there someday, but no real plans. Like, I think he has a real good idea of what he wants out of Discovery and the upcoming properties.
Okay, so he's found his lane. He's a shot caller, maybe, or like, you know.
I think so.
Okay.
Not creatively.
No, it has to be.
But he can manage other creative people.
Yeah, it has to be with something that's like already off the ground too, right? Like
a little bit, yeah. He needs 50 years of head start, but yeah. Perry White didn't write the Daily Bugle articles, but he yelled at Clark Kent and Lois Lane to do it.
Okay, so what do we want to put him in charge of next?
What needs somebody with his abilities? See, ironically, he used to write the Transformers movies, and I think he was actually one of the leading figures in the Transformers writers' room that fell apart. But I think he could maybe, if you wanted to do like a new movie series, which they also tried and didn't work, and like a companion TV show, I think that he could like run that.
Yeah, it has to be something like that too, where it's like people are going to turn up like regardless. but put him on board. And
as long as you have all the advantages, you're going to do great.
Maybe we're bearing him a little bit. Sorry.
Yeah, maybe backing up a little bit, but yeah. Anyway, compliment for him. Somebody who doesn't feel like complimenting anything right now is a guy named Martin Scorsese. He had some words to say about Marvel films and superhero films in general, and they were negative comments on them.
I was like, did he come for Star Trek now?
Wow, I can't wait till he does. Saying that they weren't real movies.
Okay. Whatever.
Also, check out The Irishman on Netflix.
Yeah, people are. We're gonna talk about this now for the rest of time because that was said. Now it feels
till he dies.
Or like he said that statement was made like, oh, it feels like forever ago now. Maybe it wasn't that long, but like now it's like every week it's like we have to have like someone else has to like chip in on the conversation so we can.
Well, now it's us, buddy.
Yeah, but we're not going to be a Twitter moment, right? So.
Oh, come on, high hopes, man.
Sorry.
Somebody else who decided to join in was a guy named Francis Ford Coppola, who is a very successful winemaker, and he said that, hey, my buddy Martin, he don't misunderstand what he said. He didn't go far enough. Those movies are despicable. And I'm like, yeah, but you made Jack.
Yeah, that seems to be the common.
So what are you talking about? Well, that or One from the Heart. But yeah. What do you think is going on with these old ass motherfuckers whose movies I love, just dunking on superhero films?
Well, I mean,
what's the point? Isn't that the punching down of all time? The maker of Goodfellas and the maker of The Godfather are trying to kick Ant-Man around?
You use Ant-Man, but...
Well, I mean, because he's small.
I don't think it can be called the ultimate punching down when these are the most... the one is the highest grossing movie of all time, So
is it jealousy?
No, I don't think it's jealousy. I don't think he cares, really. Like, I'll defend it a little bit, because he didn't go out of his way to, like, make his opinion known about this. Like, someone asked him, so...
this is the same kind of gotcha journalism that Alex Kurtzman has to deal with.
Yeah, maybe. No,
but why does the failed director of The Mummy have more decorum than the guy who directed, like, 5 of the AFI top 100 films?
I don't know. I mean, I just think that's his opinion is all I like. If someone, I at least appreciate that someone, when he was asked, he said what he thought,
Yeah, I think we got a lot of that going around in our society today, though, don't we? Are you a middle child?
No, I'm the oldest.
Okay.
I think, because
I mean, you could still. Okay. I'm just trying to figure you out.
Well, I don't like what he said to me, it doesn't hurt anybody,
Calling something despicable, though, you are trying to communicate something.
Oh yeah, I guess that's a good point. But, well, there's some distinctions here, though, because that's Coppola, and no, I don't think anyone asked him, so that's a little weird. Maybe someone was like, what do you think about what Scorsese said? But yeah, I think the whole, like, the ground zero for this, I think is a little, it was like a comment, an offhanded comment, or not even an offhand comment, but just like an opinion that someone asked, and now it's like, now we are forced to, like, argue about it forever, because now every week a new director or someone has to pitch in, and it's kind of exhausting. And now Disney gets to jump in too, and it becomes like this great now we get to talk about it till the next Marvel movie comes out or whatever.
Well, it's
hard
Irishman, it's hard to, which is on your TV, so what a movie. Well, after Spielberg, was having a shit fit about trying to keep streaming things out of the Oscars and stuff like that, like, everybody, I just see a bunch of old white men who are super entitled, who make movies about white men doing things to other white men, don't like something that's populist. And it's like, we're past that. I know you can agree with this. It is not cool anymore to pretend like something that everybody likes isn't cool. Like, I don't understand why they need to do this, except for they're just old and out of touch. And I'm not going to try to sit here and say that any of the Marvel movies are as good as Godfather 3 even, but
right. No.
What? Why?
Yeah.
I know that you're too old to understand like heat on Twitter. Like I know you're not doing it for that reason. Whoever it was that asked you, somebody asked you a question and you went, yeah, that stuff sucks. And unless you were drunk or just like riffing, you clearly go home, see these things on TV and go, that sucks. Like that made $1 billion. Why hasn't Goodfellas made $1 billion? And it's like, but clearly you don't care about that because you're making things. You have gotten the recognition that you need. What do you care what something has made money-wise at the box office?
Yeah, I don't think it's definitely not jealousy. Like that's one thing I think
really?
is true, is that I don't think he cares, and maybe that goes with his response is like, you know, maybe he knew this would be, even though it was, you know, just someone asked me this question, you know, maybe he probably knew like people are going to freak out about this, but probably doesn't care, you know. So I don't think this is some sort of like I'm going to now get everyone hyped up to talk about The Irishman, you know, like this works better in Disney's favor, you know, from a marketing standpoint. So like they're probably low-key glad he said that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to stop anybody from watching Marvel films, but I hate the fact that, you know, I'm not a filmmaker, but I am a creator, and like the guy whose films I've been watching, and if I was a filmmaker, I'd be like, boy, I hope that at least some of my films could be like that. Looks at some of the other films that I would want to make and goes, that's trash. Like it just, for me as a fan and as an artist, it's like, oh boy, where am I gone wrong?
I watched a clip of Robert Downey Jr. Did you see this? Responding to it?
No.
It was on Howard Stern's show, but I just saw like a clip on YouTube because I don't listen to that or whatever. But Howard Stern kind of asked him similar things, and I feel like his response was probably the best because he did point out like it's a ridiculous thing to say. He said to Howard Stern, it's like saying your show's not radio or something like that. Whatever, you know. But then he was also like,
it's on the internet, but
well, yeah, that's true too. But then he was also like, I mean, and he.
Once again, Robert Downey Jr. has just brought the truth to us. Like that's the perfect example because it's like saying Howard Stern's not radio. It isn't radio. It's not on the radio, but it is absolutely radio.
But it's radio, so, right? There,
yoga and $1 billion can make somebody into give them the clarity of a saint, I guess. So thank you, RDJ.
But then he has, I think, the correct way of looking at it, and it goes back to this punching down thing because he has probably millions of dollars from this, so
yes,
he doesn't care because he was like, but like whatever, you know, this just like that's his like opinion. It's like super wrong, but like, you know, he doesn't say this, but it's like I'm cashing my checks and whatever, you know.
Yes, and I shall be appearing in Doolittle, a film that should not be a film.
Yeah, and
God fell asleep and that became a film. So yeah, maybe his opinion is also suspect, but I don't know. I don't get caught up in these Twitter things, but one of the reasons that I do this and that we do this is because of a love of movies.
Yes,
some of which, many of which are genre films. And for the guy that made Hugo, I don't know how you can say that one thing or another is not a movie.
Right. I mean, I think he's wrong, but until he's like out here trying to like stop people from watching them, like I don't care. You know, I just don't care.
I could just see, he's out in front of a theater. Don't do it. Don't do it.
Yeah, I saw James Gunn comparing it to people protesting Last Temptation of the Christ, was it, or something, like people protested one of his movies, and I was like, this is not like that.
I almost protested that movie in my earlier life.
Oh, really? Well,
I mean, as a teenager who was dragged to it.
Yeah. So you could have been just like James Gunn would have been there shaking his head.
I'm going to protest The Irishman. I'm going to walk up and down in front of my TV. Oh, wait a minute. It's not a movie. That's right. It's not in the movie theater. So
nobody watched The Irishman.
Okay. You're really good at talking down angry people. I listen to virtual theater, and I think Andy and I often have a equal level of anger and frustration about things. But you're really good at that.
In the Zelda Dungeon community, people call me the diplomat.
Ah,
because I can see, I find the sides of everything.
And in the enterprising individuals community, you are a diplomat.
Oh, wow, we're really
Newly
connecting
christened.
all the dots.
Wait, what happened a couple of minutes ago?
Oh boy,
we got to get right into this. Come on.
Yeah. What's the timer? We got the timer. Right?
Oh boy, the timer's already rolling. I wanted to say quick too that thank you for helping me come to a breakthrough about Castlevania. You guys are talking about Castlevania on virtual theater, and people getting kicked in the crotch a lot. And what's that about?
Oh,
and I put two and two together. I was like, oh yeah, wait. Warren Ellis, the comic book writer, wrote at least the first season of that show, and people getting kicked in the crotch is something that happens a lot in his comics. So I think that's what's going on there.
Wow. Yeah. So that's his like Quentin Tarantino's feet. That's his thing.
Oh, I'm really tired. So things are going to be a little funnier than they're supposed to be.
Yeah, sorry.
All right, well, we have to get into this.
Yes.
And I'm almost afraid to, because there are classics and then there are classics. And it's funny to see or know how something will be accepted as the years go on. But probably the best evidence of whether or not something is successful in a classic is homages. And the movie we're talking about today has been homaged so many times that most people probably know it simply from the homages and not from the film itself. But when it arrived in Hollywood, it did okay box office, but it was a kick in the crotch for the rest of Hollywood and films, winning 3 Oscars and going on to be generally seen as the most, or one of the best films of all time. Number 2, I believe, on the IMDb top 100 list. That movie is, of course, Casablanca.
Casablanca, city of hope and despair, located in French Morocco in North Africa. The meeting place of adventurers, fugitives, criminals, refugees, lured into this danger-swept oasis by the hope of escape to the Americas. But they're all trapped, for there is no escape. Against this fascinating background is woven the story of an imperishable love and the enthralling saga of 6 desperate people, each in Casablanca to keep an appointment with destiny.
I was willing to shoot Captain Reno, and I'm willing to shoot you. All right, Major, you asked for it.
You knew how much I loved you. How much I still love you.
I know a good deal more about you than you suspect. I know, for instance, that you're in love with a woman. It's perhaps a strange circumstance that we both should love the same woman.
What do you want for Sam?
I don't buy and sell human beings.
That's too bad. That's Casablanca's leading commodity.
You can ask any price you want, but you must give me those letters.
That's no deal.
All right. I tried to reason with you. I tried everything. Now I want those letters.
Released in 1942, directed by Michael Curtiz, who was a Hungarian-born director who left Hungary in the mid-20s, I believe. He got out ahead of the whole Nazi problem, but he was making films there. And it's funny because you hear about like a lot of the stars of this film, Paul Henreid, Peter Lorre, were people who were fleeing the Nazis, right? They were ethnic minorities, or they were artists who just didn't want to deal with that stuff, and so they're leaving, like the people in Casablanca, and coming to America. And Michael Curtiz got out early because his Hungary, after the Russian Revolution, was then communist, and the communist government nationalized the film industry. So he's like, well, I don't want to do that. So he left and moved to Vienna and made films there. So imagine being that guy watching the government take over and going, no, I'm going to go somewhere else. And then now the Nazis are coming up and it's happening again. And you're like, okay, fuck this. I'm just going to go to America.
Yeah, you really screwed up on that move, I guess.
Yeah. But he directed all kinds of films. And I've heard people compare him to like the Steven Spielberg of his day. He directed musicals. He directed like pirate films were like the action films of that day. He directed The Adventures of Robin Hood, which made Errol Flynn a star. Olivia de Havilland, of course, was in a lot of those pirate movies. He directed White Christmas, Angels with Dirty Faces, Yankee Doodle Dandy, got James Cagney his only Academy Award. So he's a guy who was really like the utility player, also the star player of his day. He could really do anything. And yeah, he was like one of the number one directors back then.
Spielberg is a good comparison because I was kind of nervous to watch and talk about this because I think, like, for me, the only references or the like only way I knew this movie was from all the references. Like, I was unsure if I've seen it, and I was like, yeah, I definitely don't remember this. But I was also nervous because I was sort of expecting something out of this movie that it wasn't. Like, maybe that would be, a little bit, slower, a little bit more understated or whatever, kind of like what you expect out of older films sometimes. But
yeah,
this movie is like...
It's a banger.
It's clipping along.
It goes.
And it's constantly interesting and exciting.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, this does have, like, even though it's way before this is a concept, it has this, like, blockbuster vibe to it almost.
Yeah. The pacing is, I wouldn't say relentless, but it is energetic, and it is full of enough material and characters and dialogue to keep going. Much different than, I mean, not every movie was like slow in the old times, but it's funny how you're pointing out that it has such a modern pacing and sensibility that resonated then and just still works now. It's timeless. But we'll get to that. First of all, I want to say that it is based on an unproduced play called Everybody Comes to Rick's. It was written by Murray Burnett and Joan Allison. And the story is that Burnett was an English teacher who went on vacation to Europe in 1938 and saw all the stuff that was going on there. And I think he was in Northern Africa or somewhere like that at that time, and was drinking in like this hotel bar and seeing all these refugees, all these Nazis, all these French people sort of elbow to elbow, and had this idea to write a play. And apparently the bar also had a African-American piano player too, who sang. So a lot of this comes from real life. They wrote the play. It was never actually produced, but somebody from Warner Brothers saw it, read it, and just said, well, we're going to buy this. And so they bought it for $20,000, which was a lot of money then. It was also probably about the most money that ever been spent on something that was unproduced for adaptation. So
speaking of blockbuster, this is a big endeavor already.
Oh yeah. And this is it's before 42 when the film came out, but this is, Jack Warner it's just cranking them out. Warner Brothers is huge. They have all these stars. The film was, I've heard that it was a modest success at the box office, but it was fairly well regarded critically. And come Oscar time, it blew everybody away. It got 8 Academy Award nominations. It won for Best Director, Best Picture, and Best Adapted Screenplay as well.
Okay, wow.
So it was absolutely successful in that regard. It's funny because, it's one of those films that I think that it was, like we said, well received, but then just cleaned up around Oscar time. So it was the Green Book of its day, really.
Oh, no.
Green Book and Casablanca. I'm just making those. They've both got colors in the names. They're the same thing, basically.
Same movie.
Yeah, white guy, black guy. Right.
Right. Yeah, I was kind of wondering if it did, what it was at the time, how it was treated at the time, because I have no context. I know it's, a classic, but there are other... movies we look back on as the greatest film of all time category, but at the time didn't get the light of day. So that's cool.
Yeah, I can't remember specifically. I mean, this is, of course, a great time for film. And there are many great films, but there's also a lot of trash, too. And I'm trying to remember who it won against for Best Picture, but I don't think it's anything that you'd really remember. Don't quote me on that, but yeah, it stood out. It stood out then, and it stands out now for sure. What else did we want to say about it? You were talking about having not a lot of experience with it. Had you seen it before?
So yeah, that's what I was wondering, because I was like,
you didn't remember if you'd seen it before.
I couldn't remember, but because it is one of those things. It's like, I know people who claim like they've never seen The Wizard of Oz, but like they could tell you everything that happens in it. You know
okay,
I mean?
yeah.
And so I was like, yeah, I think like I know, like, you know, like Play It Again, Sam, you know, here's looking at you, kid. I know all this stuff and I'm like, I think I know what happens in this movie. But then I was watching it and I was just so surprised by everything that was happening. I was like, I've never seen this movie for real. And it was kind of cool because it was on top of obviously just being great. No surprise there.
Yeah.
It was cool to like have these things connected in my mind, you know, like, okay, like, it's like almost like, they made that reference. Like, cool.
Yeah. It's really just for my own personal background. This is like a long bet for me. Do you know what I mean? I'll tell you what I mean.
Okay.
I've seen it 100 times. It's one of those, when I was, 15, 16, I can't remember when I decided consciously I'm going to be a film bug. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah.
It's like the difference between like, when I was growing up, like we'd go to a restaurant, I'd always get a hamburger and fries because I love it. And then at some point you go, I'm going to be a hamburger guy. And then you go to all the hamburger joints, and you have, you rate them, like, oh, this has got the best beef. This has got the best buns.
Mm-hmm.
At some point in my youth, I decided I'm going to be a movie guy. And that means I have to go see all the good movies. So I'm going to go out and get Citizen Kane. I'm going to go out and get Casablanca. I'm going to go out and get all these films, watch them, probably not understand them, but do it anyway to get my education in. And I remember watching this one, loving it, and then watching it over and over again throughout my adult life. I hadn't seen it for a while until I got to now, and I was a little scared that I would watch it with like more adult, mature eyes and think, oh, you sweet summer child, what did you know? And no, it's still one of the best, most entertaining, most moving like films of all time. And there is, it's got a 98% on Rotten Tomatoes, which means that 2% of somebody didn't like it.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
I'm going to make that person famous at the end of the show.
We were going to get to this. Yeah.
We'll get to there eventually.
This is close. Like, this is very close to being like a perfect movie, if that exists,
Yeah. Which I could see if your criticism, and I don't think this would make your review not fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, but if your criticism was it's too perfect or that it is too bad. Well, that's what I always tell people in my job interviews. No, I mean, like if it's too balanced in all its elements, maybe you wanted something that's a little more about the horrors of war, something that maybe is more about the melodrama of the romance. There are movies that are more clever and more funny. I could see that, but it's one of those things. It's got all of the columns are full. All the boxes are checked off.
Yeah.
And you can't have that all the time.
There is something to also like a movie that's like longer and maybe a bit more rough around the edges, but it explores some deep themes in like a way. Whereas this, to me, it feels more of like it's like all about like, well, there's some good themes in this too, but it's like, hit me with that story, give me that plot. This is a great, thrilling story. It's a ride. Yeah. So that's what it's delivering.
And meticulously made as well. That's another thing about Curtiz is that I think there are a lot of, even now there's a lot of like popular filmmakers whose films do well and they don't have, there's nothing that characterizes them necessarily. And I think that you could say that like Curtiz was actually like visually, I don't think there's a lot that really distinguishes him. I think that he's more of a character director and an actor's director. There aren't any like sweeping moves or any really interesting shots, but he sets it up and he lets, the people, the good actors with the good dialogue deliver everything and he captures it all. very meticulously. I think Scorsese would like that part, but of course there are no slow motion explosions with 70s songs over them. Speaking of songs, of course, the famous song in this movie as time goes by, it's from a 1931 musical called Everybody's Welcome. And again, it was just a favorite song of Burnett's. So imagine that you were like just out of college and you're like, I should write a play. And you wrote a play and it was about, let's say, The Legend of Zelda or something. And then also people play The Legend of Zelda and then they're listening to a song that you enjoy, and I've gotten in trouble for trying to characterize your musical taste before.
They're listening to Born in the USA.
Born in the USA. There you go. Yeah. And somebody from Warner Brothers came along, read it, bought it, and you're like, great. And then they're like, hold on, I got it. Bruce, is it okay? Okay. We got Born in the USA, and everything just went bam, bam, bam. And we've got this movie. I think it shows more than anything else, like just the power of Warner at that time.
Yeah, it reminds me of, I think episodes ago we talked about how like Quentin Tarantino just throws actors he likes in movies.
Yeah, and they say yes, yeah.
And music too.
Get your feet out. Yeah.
That would be, if I ever was smart enough to like make a film, that I would love to be able to like, you know, like kind of have a collage. It's like making a collage of stuff you like.
Yeah. We won't, I'm frustrated because I have a movie show, and on the movie show we talk about a lot of the details that went into making the film. I want to talk more about how this compares, of course, to the Star Trek episode, and so I think we need to talk about the setting and the series and the characters and those elements that have been repeated down through other forms of media. So if you are that kind of head, listen to my Craft to Services show. If we ever cover Casablanca again on this show, which I think is very possible because of how often it's homaged, maybe we'll get into that stuff. But in the meantime, we'll keep moving on. Let's talk about the cast. Of course, this is Humphrey Bogart at his most Humphrey Bogart-esque. This is his first romantic role, really. He had not played a lover this much in previous films. He got his start, I believe this is like kind of like a, you know, not a glorified extra, a heavy. And of course, after Maltese Falcon and films like that, he started to develop this image. And so that's on display here. It stars, of course, Ingrid Bergman, who is somewhat new to the game still after her premiere in Intermezzo. And apparently, Hal Wallace, the producer behind this movie, got to use her in this film by lending David O. Selznick Olivia de Havilland. Because remember, at this point, they've got the studio system where you make a movie for the studio because they basically own you. In fact, Maltese Falcon, which was filmed a year or two before, is another Warner Brothers film, and it stars Humphrey Bogart, Peter Lorre, and Sidney Greenstreet, three actors who are all in this film.
So Peter Lorre is in this, and I was like, I know who much like I said earlier with Humphrey Bogart, I was like, I know who this person is, but it's
this guy.
Also only through like the other millions of references to other movies he's been in, including the ones you just mentioned. Yeah. So,
hide me, Rick! You've got to help me! Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Paul Henreid appears as Victor Laszlo. He was an Austrian actor and director, and apparently he's a real good-looking guy, and he's a really good actor. But apparently he wasn't too impressed with the production. A lot of people who were involved with this, in fact, I think just about everybody thought this would be just another little flick, pro-war kind of propaganda-ish at the beginning of World War II. And I think everybody was surprised at how successful it became. But he didn't think that like he didn't think that Ingrid Bergman was a very good actress. He thought that Bogey was kind of a dud, and so I don't think he had a good time on this film, but it doesn't show. Claude Rains appears as Renault. Rains should need no introduction. He's an English actor. He's been in a million films. If you've ever seen Notorious, he's the bad guy in Notorious that Bergman's also in. He was in Robin Hood, Curtiz's film as well. He's in The Wolfman. Have you ever seen The Wolfman?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Wait, who's he in that?
He's the dad. He's the guy. He kills the Wolfman with the cane.
Oh, okay. He's got that look, yeah.
Yeah, he is really great. Conrad Veidt plays Strasser. He's another refugee German actor. And he, you think about this is a Hollywood film where Americans all we know is Hollywood, but he is a just a totally super famous European actor who was in a million things. I can't even list them all. But he was in The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, if you've ever heard of that very, very early film. Yeah. So he's sort of lived several lives, going through to the different periods of German cinema and then coming to America and basically playing a bunch of Nazis.
He's got a look, I'm sorry to say.
Yeah,
but...
it's ironic. I know it's ironic to flee these assholes, and it's like, you want me to what? Okay, give me the armband.
Well, yeah, we've seen that happen in previous movies we've covered too. So, like, yeah, I guess I don't know. That sucks for them, but
but you're portraying them as vicious. You have experience with their viciousness, and their banality.
Yeah, I'm sure there's something interesting about exploring that too for them. Yeah.
Yeah, Sidney Greenstreet plays Signor Ferrari in this. He's, again, another English guy. He was in, like we talked about before, The Maltese Falcon, and very talented character actor. I love how, for whatever reason, most of his scenes end with him swatting a fly.
Is that a choice?
I must be. Oh, definitely it's a choice for sure. But like I've been racking my brain. Maybe the symbolism is right in front of me, but... it just seems to be this little weird thing that he does. Maybe it's a tick that they just didn't edit out. And for the rest of the cast, I won't name them all, but I think it's interesting to note that they are almost all playing their actual nationalities. It is a cast full of refugees, people who were themselves displaced from Europe for the exact reason that their characters in the film were. The guy that plays Carl, the waiter, his sisters died in a concentration camp. He, himself had fled Germany just a year or two before. And so that, I think, all goes into making this film. When they're, that famous scene where they're singing the La Marseillaise, and everybody's crying and they're all just like getting together and singing this, this anthem. Like, I think that is, that's all there. All that emotion is real.
Yeah, I have to admit something about that. I cried during that scene. Yeah. Actually, yeah, I couldn't believe it. I was blown away that I was crying. But no, I wasn't. That doesn't surprise me, actually.
Yeah, it's an amazing scene, and it's part and parcel of this entire film, which is a propaganda film. Propaganda can be good. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's very specific sort of notes in this film of people, you've got a character like Rick who is on the fence. He's a former freedom fighter, and he has to be sort of convinced to rejoin this fight. And he is playing chess with himself, at the beginning of the film when we see him. Like, I don't know what that's a metaphor for, but for me, it's like jerking off. Basically it's like you are pretending to be sort of strategic, and kind of caught up in this, but you're not. You're just literally doing nothing. And as we go on, throughout the film, I think that there are very specific. I mean, some things are like Renault literally kicks a bottle of Vichy water into a wastebasket. Like, we get it, but there's a lot of more sort of subtle elements in here that about how America at this point has joined the fight, but the film was kind of conceived and the play was written before we had. So there's a lot of calls to arms in this film that I think are directed at the people of the world, and that includes America.
Yeah, it's almost like, if you're not convinced, or if you're just getting involved, it's like, justifying the conviction to enter the war or whatever.
Yeah, isolationism is not a practical policy.
Yeah, it's funny because I guess we said there are some themes here. Obviously, I love that it ties into every element of the film. His love life and his, I don't know. There's something that's like. There is something so efficient about that type of writing, I think.
Yeah. And even in 1942, the idea of a blank with a heart of gold who needed just the right nudge to turn around and be good again was already tired. But the movie is so smart because it gets ahead of that. It knows that we know that's going to happen.
Yeah, and every character is saying it.
So we have Renault basically being the chorus for the whole time. And every time something like that happens, we're not supposed to go, oh, he calls it out. He's like, oh, wow, he paid for a bill. Ooh, he's drinking with somebody. What's happening here? Let's all watch. Like he's constantly like lampshading it before they even had that term. And yet it still works because we just believe it. I have to say that like I've never really been blown away by Humphrey Bogart as an actor. I think like a lot of matinee idols, it's just more about his looks and his sort of just the feeling and the energy that he brings to it. But I'm really impressed by his performance in this. I think at this point he'd had a lot of practice, but he plays drunk really good.
Yeah, no, certainly. And this is the only real thing I've seen, but I feel like I would back his performance in this and him as an actor.
Yeah.
Like, because it's definitely a very specific thing he has to do that I think doesn't often get enough credit. Like, I think sometimes people are like, oh yeah, that person is just like wooden or whatever.
Yeah, because they weren't really doing like method acting back then. It's more like, how interesting can you say the lines that you've been given?
But I think they're like there are people who do that poorly, and I also think like there is a need to be able to do that. So I don't know. Yeah,
something that I never really caught until this go around is how quick the timeline is. We see the flashback of the Germans, marching into Paris, and then we turn this around, and it's like the winter of 1941, maybe early 1942. So it's really only been like 12 months. Like Rick fled Paris to evade the Germans, and then managed to own and run a cafe in a year.
That did stick out to me. I didn't think about the specifics of that timeline, but they were talking about his past life like it was like so long ago.
I mean, like fighting Franco, that would have been a couple years ago. But yeah, like he was in Paris like last year. So I understand that like his feelings for her are fresh, but it seems like they make it like a really old wound. And really, it's like pretty recent. It's like you could still expect, did you send me a letter or something like that? Where were you?
Yeah, the Franco part clicked with me, but yeah, maybe that's why it would be still so strong for him, because it was so recent.
Yeah. Sam would not have forgotten how to play as time goes by.
I think, yeah, no doubt. I think there are a lot of things in it that, I mean, you could probably scrutinize and be like, that's kind of weird, but like they just, they're efficient, and they either, there's someone telling you the whole time how to feel, and it just works, it's not like obnoxious.
Yeah. I love when he's getting drunk, that speech about they're asleep all over America. What's going on in New York? I bet they're asleep. I just see that as, Americans are not in this fight. They don't think it's their fight. They're the sleeping giant. That, of course, that all changes in December of 1941. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's just all part of this very well acted, very well written propaganda piece to get to join this beautiful friendship and join with your European allies and help liberate Europe.
I was convinced.
What is Sam's role outside of the old thing where they're not slaves anymore, but I've still got a black guy following me around? Assuming that it's not just that, like, what is his relationship to Rick, to Mr. Richard?
Wow. This really put me on the spot here.
Don't do it. Don't ever do it. But if you make a sequel or a prequel to Casablanca, and if go to the Wikipedia page, they have tried. I see it as like a Pennyworth situation, right?
I was about to say that.
Oh, really?
Actually.
That's why we co-host these things.
I just rewatched Batman vs Superman the other day, and we don't need to talk about that.
Yeah,
because that'll go on forever. But I was thinking, like, why is he like here still? Like, but it also makes sense. It just makes sense that he's there. So they could have a backstory like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that, we see that, Rick is like, apparently he was a gun runner. He was a guerrilla fighting Franco, but now he's just a guy in a black tie or white tux running a bar. So it's like, yeah, sure, Sam plays the piano now, but maybe Sam was on the Tommy gun, like, you know, in earlier times. I should mention too, we didn't mention Dooley Wilson, of course.
Yeah.
Who plays Sam in this, was, I believe, a drummer. I know he was a singer, but he was also like a drummer in nightclubs, and so not a piano player. Doesn't fake it all that well. Michael Curtis doesn't know to not shoot the keys, I guess. But they wanted to redub his voice. I don't know why. The studio did, but they said no. He's going to sing the songs, and he does.
No, he's great. He's great. Yeah. Not mentioning him, it's just hard because we've already gone down, I think, 8 people in the cast, and like every actor is just, you know, a giant in this movie, and every character. This is another one of those movies like like Die Hard, where not a character feels wasted. You know what I mean? Even the ones who are just there for a cup of coffee.
Yeah. And it all starts with the opening of the movie, which is, you know, Casablanca. But then we go into the streets, and this movie papers in all the cracks with little vignettes of people we don't know, people we may never see again. But it literally tells us, because the guy Casablanca, but it also shows us what people are going through, and you understand the desperation. Instead of just having somebody tell us that, well, it's really tough to get out of Casablanca, we see all these little things. And then we get runners like the young couple that's trying to get out.
I got a little nervous when all that stuff was happening in the beginning, because I was like, wait, who are these people? Am I going to remember this? And then, but then, like, all the characters in this are actually so memorable, and, like, I just loved all their little stories. So,
yeah.
It was a red herring in the beginning of the movie.
So like I said before, the fact that the actors are all international themselves, a lot of their stories are similar to their characters, that just makes it's not exactly an ensemble piece, but it's kind of an ensemble piece. You know, like you said, like everybody is important to it in one way or another.
Yeah, everyone, there's not a scene wasted, there's not a character wasted, like, yeah, it just all clicks.
I don't even. It's Casablanca, man. I mean, what else do you want to? What do you want to say about it?
Okay, so one thing going back to previous episodes was we've talked about, different. We've seen now different eras of movies try to like come to terms with or like think about or recontextualize World War II. Yeah. And I just thought, even though it's a propaganda film and it has a very specific, it's not everything is like exactly how it was. It was interesting, I thought, to see a movie that actually exists in that time and to like kind of see things that aren't in other movies about World War II.
Okay.
Like a lot of like certain things just feel so matter of fact that like they're very matter of fact about a lot of things, especially because they're, like some of the people in it are just like a Nazi official just chilling, at a cafe. So like,
yeah,
that's
I love the scene where he's just eating with Rick and he's like, what do you think? Do you see us in Paris, or what about Spain? New York? Do you see us in New York? They're already sort of like picking out drapes. Yeah,
exactly. And they're like, in this, we have our protagonist like having dinner or whatever or hanging out with like this Nazi general or whatever. But to me, it felt less weird than watching like The Enemy Below, where like at the end it was like, maybe we're not so different,
yeah.
Like, so I don't know. It was just interesting.
The captain, the Nazi captain, his like ensign is reading Mein Kampf, and he's just like, Mein Kampf, come on.
Yeah, so there's something like cartoony about that in a way.
Yeah.
Even though that movie is trying to be like a bit more, gritty or whatever. Not gritty, but
yeah. But this is more savvy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's there's something about the fact that like such evil that exists in the world can be so mundane or like normal, and to me that's like something interesting to look out for, because I think a lot of people, sometimes things slip back towards that and people are like, oh, it couldn't happen to us, and I think that's kind of an interesting message for modern times too, when like bad things happen now, and like sometimes it's like let's not evoke the Nazis, you know, because we're not like that. You know, we could never be like that. But it's like, I don't know, it's just good perspective, I think, to be like, to a lot of people this was like normal business and, you know, run of the mill.
I really like the fact that, and it's just like a simple trick of structure, but I like the inversion of chronologically, you know, the scenes in Paris. We see how they've gotten together, and he is this fighter. He's a guy, you know, she picks him because he's like Laszlo, really, right? She thinks he's dead. She finds this other guy who's this inspiring figure who's going to do whatever, and she kind of runs off, and she's not going to go with that. And then, you know, later on in the film, now he's burnt out, and she's with this guy who is like he used to be, you know, is this fighter that he can't be anymore, or doesn't want to be anymore. And I think that's really neat. I also like the fact that in Paris that she says things that he says later that end up in his mouth. You know, the fact that she's trying to fawn him off, and she says, you know, she doesn't want to plan that far ahead, and then he uses that as an insult later. And she's talking about like how it's a crazy world. And later on, he's giving the same speech, but he's saying it's important that you stay together because this is a crazy world. Like, you have to stay with him because he needs you, and you guys love each other. And I'm going to go off and do what I have to do because that's what I have to do.
That's
kind of they flip flop by the end.
That's Chef's Kiss.
Chef's
right
Kiss.
There. Yeah, Chef's Kiss. One awarded to that line.
Boy.
The only other like big thing for me that I really wanted to talk about was I also liked seeing like the setting was cool, and like it being like kind of like the edge of all this conflict. It reminded me a little bit of Deep Space Nine, if we're comparing it to Star Trek, you know, just seeing like you know, this frontier almost of or, you know, meeting in the middle of all these worlds, you know.
Yeah
You know, you do have you know, an American guy, you know, hosting a Nazi general in his cafe while, and
a Spanish lady playing the guitar.
It was it was cool, I thought.
And a Russian bartender, and and they all, to a man and woman, love the Marseillaise. We all want to. Have you ever heard the actual lyrics of La Marseillaise?
No.
You don't want to know them. Well, I'll tell you. There's some interesting parts that harken back to an earlier idea of nationhood. There's a part where we talk about. Do you hear the ferocious soldiers? You know, these are the soldiers who are not the French. They're going to come in and they're going to kill your families, your women. So watch out for that. So that's when you say, "Marche, take arms." To let the impure blood water our fields. And it's like, oh, okay, well, you didn't want to change those lyrics at all after 1945, but okay, fine. It's a great tune. It's a great tune.
I thought about. I felt bad crying at that moment because I was like, this is stupid. There is not a good national anthem. I'm sure if you looked at the lyrics, this is terrible, but it was just killing me.
But it's the spirit of what they are longing for and what they want to fight for. So I can't say anything about that moment. Yvonne, you know, the actress that plays Yvonne, was a French refugee herself. They're all just playing themselves.
Yeah, no, that makes me like it even more. I assumed, you know, like I said, it took place at the time, so like I felt like there are people who have insights from the time, but that's even more crazy that it's like most of them.
Yeah, the only person who wasn't was the young wife, who's played by Joy Page, who was like the niece-in-law of Jack Warner or something like that.
Yeah,
so that was bullshit. But anyway,
that had to be in there. Yeah.
I want to talk about everything that they get away with in this movie. You know, this was made in 1942. You've still got standards and practices, censors. You've got the Hays Code. So there's things that you can't get away with, and yet you've got a script where. Basically, the guy who is the head of police is sleeping with women in order to let them get visas to leave. Like, that's his Tinder.
Yeah. This is super sketchy, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. And they couldn't do anything with that. They couldn't even say that that's what was happening. And yet you get, first of all, you get a really great line with Rick where the young wife is saying, "Oh, me and my husband are meeting with him with Renault tomorrow," and he's like, "Wow, he's getting broad-minded."
I still feel like it just skips by. You know what I mean? Like, even me watching it, like, I'd be like, "Huh," and then I'd be like, "Anyway," you know.
You have an entire scene that is really like the beginning of the emotional turn for the main character that is tipped off by a young woman asking our hero if her husband will still love her if she fucks this guy so they can live. And it is, you know exactly what they're talking. It's like The Contest. Remember the Seinfeld episode, The Contest? That's rated,
of course.
It's all about jerking it. It's 4 people trying not to jerk it. It's rated TV PG. It's TV PG because they don't say anything. You know, you don't say anything explicit. You just suggest. And that whole scene is suggestion. It's what she's talking about is borderline rape. And it doesn't, and it gets past the censors because it's all implied. And I think that is amazing writing. It's also amazing writing because it mirrors exactly what he is, the triangle that he's involved in.
Yeah.
And then it leads to that awesome scene, which is even better writing because there is no writing at the roulette table where he gives them the money basically to do what they want. And it's all dialogue-less, except for him going, "Put it on 22. And then they get all the money and they go off. And then you break the tension where, "How are we doing tonight?" The roulette guy's like, "We're not doing as good as I thought. we a few less thousand than I thought we were going to make." Like, that's insane level of writing, of craftsmanship in the script.
Yeah, one thing that makes that so amazing to me was, until you pointed it out, like, I didn't consider that, like, people, that part was being snuck by, like, where they're talking about sleeping with the guy. Like, I just was like, yeah, okay, you know, like,
yeah,
that is impressive, I think. For as far as the roulette table goes, like, that was also amazing. Don't you think if that existed now, there would be like a CinemaSins, like, they didn't, like, how did that work, you know, like trying to, like, pick that apart for no reason.
Let me channel my inner Francis Ford Coppola and say CinemaSins is despicable. So.
Exactly. Yeah, that's
now
what
I understand.
Yeah, but I feel like if you look at, it just made me think that in that moment, like, not that the movie actually was flawed, but like, wow, that was so subtle and cool. But I bet, like, there are people who would probably hate that if they weren't already told this was an iconic, one of the greatest movies of all time. Maybe that was one of the people in the 1 or 2% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh, we're getting there. If I had to criticize, I guess maybe I'd say I never really believe the movie goes out of its way to make you believe that that Rick has gone to the dark side. You know, other than him helping out this young couple, the whole last act is like, I got this plan. I'm going to sell out Laszlo, and I'm going to run off with Elsa. She's with me again. And you know he's got something cooking. Like, you never really buy that's when the gun comes out. You're like, okay, finally the gun came out.
Oh, that's when I cried. Okay.
Oh, okay.
I was like, because when that came out, I knew it was going to happen or whatever. Like, when it was headed that way, but it was two things. One, it was just the moment was so intense, but also that was so satisfying. You know, like, almost because I knew it was coming, and it was like a payoff, you know?
Yeah. We like Renault. Like, he's fun. We know that he's friends with Rick. He's probably essentially a good person, but I like the fact that he's still doing his job. Like, I'll call the airport, and he calls Strasser, you know, and he's like, "Yeah, I need a plane. Yep. I'm at the Casablanca bar." I like the fact that he's noble, you know, for his own causes. Like, he's still doing his job.
Like you said, putting his issues aside, but that's, to me, that it made him a strong character because he was like consistent with himself, I guess, in a way.
Consistent with his inconsistency. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Yeah.
he felt like a real person, I guess. I wouldn't say I was ever thinking like Rick wasn't going to do the right thing or whatever, but I did buy in the beginning, despite it kind of hitting you over the head, like you're a cynic, like you're an asshole or whatever.
Yeah,
I did buy
they
it.
lay it on thick.
Because it does start with him kind of like, talking down to this woman, and it's like, God, this, what a dick, But it's
and after he drunkenly balls her out, then he sees her in the market the next day, and he's like, "Hey, come on over. I know you're gonna come over." Like is he trying to patch it up, or is he at this point just like, I just really want to fuck you. Can please let me fuck you? Like what is he doing? It's indeterminate, and I like it that way.
Yeah.
Another example of the sort of indeterminacy. Do you think that Elsa really wanted to stay with him at the end?
I guess I believed it, but I don't know.
He and the movie sets us up by saying, he literally says, "You could say anything now, and I know why you're here. Like, you pulled a gun on me. I know you're here to save your husband." And then after saying that, they go through this whole thing where she's like, "No, I know now that I was, I don't ever want to be without you. I don't know what to do. I'll do the thinking for both of us." And I feel like I think this is held up by the text, but they're both playing this game with each other. And at the end, I am noble. It's a movie full of people trying to be ignoble, and they can't. They are noble people. They have to be good. And so at the end, he's like, "No, you have to go." And I don't know. I think it's kind of ambiguous. I think she definitely would have stayed if she felt like her husband's life depended on it, but I don't know. I'm not sure if the movie wants us to believe that they would have stayed together. They couldn't have. The Hays Code says that you can't see a woman leave her husband for another man.
My God.
Yeah, so they wouldn't have for that reason, but I think they're pushing it as far as they can.
I did buy, obviously, that she's still into him, but even at that point, but I guess that's not, that's not a big reach, obviously.
Yeah. She's so good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's who you said did not have faith in her. That's as an actress, like that's
Henry.
Silly.
Yeah, her co-star.
Oh
he didn't think she was good, and Oscar disagreed with him 3 times. But yeah, she is fantastic in that film. No weak links. That's how you make a good film. To have no weak links. Yeah, everybody should do that.
Make all the right choices.
Yeah, just make all the right choices. Easy.
Sometimes it would be frustrating to see a movie where like people all pretty much do the right thing. Like, you know, like that is kind of what is happening here. By the end of it, it's like everyone has made the right decision. But that was just, I don't know, that was satisfying to see brought to a head.
We've done a bad job. I've done a bad job. There's a lot more that we could say. There's a lot more that I want to say, but I'll leave it to the 2 assholes that blew Casablanca's perfect feedback rating on Rotten Tomatoes. One of them was Time Magazine. Time Magazine itself. And it's a little tricky because Rotten Tomatoes uses a combination of modern and contemporary, that is, reviews of the time, depending on how it shakes out. So like Time Magazine reviewed the movie in 1942, but you can't find that review. You have to go through, you have to subscribe to their service. And I don't know, I didn't want to go through that, but the blurb that they give it that says that it's rotten is nothing short of an invasion could add much to Casablanca.
It just sucks because that's not enough to like.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if they thought it didn't have enough action or what, or they just thought that, like I said before, like maybe it's just sort of too nice and perfect. But I will tell you one thing. There was one other person that gave a negative rating to Casablanca on Rotten Tomatoes.
Martin Scorsese.
His name is Martin.
Oh.
Martin Scribs. Wait a minute. Somebody check this. That sounds like an alias. Martin Scribs is a guy who calls himself the low IQ Canadian. No argument so far. And I didn't find his full review either, but the blurb on Rotten Tomatoes is overblown.
That's not enough. I need to know.
Well, I did a little. I went through all this not doing homework. I did do a little bit of homework, and I can give you some comparative reviews from other Martin Scribb movies that will tell you why this guy is full of shit. So I found him on two specific pages. One was a Pajiba article. Let me finish. That was called The Rotten Tomatoes Wall of Shame. It's 33 films that have one positive review, and it sort of like tells you what those positive reviews are, right?
Okay.
So it's like,
that sounds great.
Here's a movie that like everybody agrees, Freddy Got Fingered or whatever. Who's like the one person that said, oh no, it's pretty good. And I don't have anything against Freddy Got Fingered. It's just known to be a really bad movie.
Yeah.
So
is it Martin?
That'd be great, wouldn't it? It is not. The movie Mr. Wrong. This is the movie featuring Ellen DeGeneres and Bill Pullman. Yeah. Where she's wants to get married, but there's a gun or something. It's like a not funny movie. It's like 7% on Rotten Tomatoes. Martin Scribbs, the low IQ Canadian, said, fascinating in retrospect as a lesbian's take on dating men.
Okay. Yeah,
is it? Are you an expert on that?
We're getting somewhere, I
think.
Ellen
say that? Yeah. Here's something else. In an article on a website called The Common Room that's entitled Critical Impotency in Reaction to Cuarón's Y Tu Mama Tambien. Did you ever see Y Tu Mama?
I've not seen that movie.
It's pretty good. You should see it.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say it's fantastic, but it's good. The author of the article writes about him. Martin Scribbs, who is somehow featured on the front page of reviews, I agree, suggests, quote, to everyone who bent over backwards to praise Y Tu Mama as a raunchy, spicy, racist, sexy, or hot, here's a novel idea. Skip this mild stuff and rent some honest-to-God porn.
Okay.
It is a sexually explicit film, absolutely, for its own reasons, but that is the lamest, flyover statist take I can think of.
Right. So that's good, because one thing, I'm actually interested, depending on the thing, in listening to like maybe a podcast or whatever where like they criticize something I love, because I'm like, what's the angle they're coming at it from, why, just to try and understand. And also
that's why good people lose, though. That's why Donald Trump is president, because there is a side that is willing to hear all viewpoints and there's a side that has nothing to say. And so we're like, tell us more. It's just nothing. There is no argument.
That's fair. And, yeah. What I was going to say is, like, I will enjoy it if it's, if someone's got this, like, unique perspective. Like, I have actually listened to, going back to our earlier conversation, a lot of discussions about Marvel movies, which I love. And, I like to hear valid criticisms of them. But it's when you get into something like this where it's like just like a really shallow interpretation or like discussion around the movie. It's like, what is even the point of this? And that, going back to Donald Trump, we're talking about, so it's like really shallow and almost worthless things being said, It's
impossible to take overblown seriously, because it is... That isn't even in question. We were talking on Discord, and you were saying, I don't want to give away my take, but this is a pretty good movie. I think it's an obvious take. And my response, and I wasn't like floating in the lotus position when I said it. I wasn't trying to be a Zen master, but my response was essentially, it's never like giving anything away to have an obvious take. Like, what you do then is you examine, why is that obvious? Why do we hold this truth to be self-evident? And so I would even agree with him on that it is overblown, because it's at this point uncriticizable. I do not, Martin Scribbs, envy your job as the low IQ Canadian. How do you say something bad about this film? But we have on this podcast, we have found things that we said, it probably could be like this or it could be like that. And we're just two chuckleheads who've talked for an hour, way too long, about this film. And all you can do is point out overblown. Why not also say that it's called Casablanca? Like, these are obvious things. His takes are obvious.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a great point.
Yeah.
It is obvious in one way, in that it is uncriticizable, but also going back to it reminding me of like this Spielberg, like, you know, it's clicking along or anything. Like I expect to hear overblown about, you know, a movie like The Thin Red Line or something, you know, something that is big and you know, not, it's big and messy, you know what I mean? But this is really just kind of like an old, you know, exciting, thrilling movie. Like, it's not, like, it is overblown, but it's also like, as a movie, it's not, you know what I mean? It's to the point. It doesn't waste your time.
We need to talk about Star Trek and the way that it quotes this, but you know that this has been quoted by many other forms of media, you know?
Yeah.
You ever heard of the movie Barbed Wire?
Yeah.
Barbed Wire is...
Why are we talking about Barbed Wire?
I'll tell you. 1995, I believe. I used to be really good at this, but yeah, 1995 movie starring Pamela Anderson. I'm not a Pamela Anderson fan, but I was a Dark Horse Comics fan. It's based on a Dark Horse Comics character named Barbed Wire. And so I go to this crappy Pamela Anderson film, and I'm watching it. And as I'm watching it, Barbed Wire lives in Steel City. And Steel City is, in this instance, set in a dystopic future. There's a war going on, and she runs a bar. And two people come in, one of whom she used to date, and they need transport out of here because they're resistance fighters. And I'm like, 20 minutes into this thing, I'm like, they're doing Casablanca. Are you kidding me? They are literally doing Casablanca right now. Like, that's how deep it is. Like, you can do a Casablanca.
The foundation for everything is there. Like, I feel like the reason you could compare it to something like Spielberg is because it is there in the bones of like most movies. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
that's why I think, I mean, we talked about it being uncriticizable, but I would like to see, not a sequel, but I'd like to see somebody take this and prove to me that it isn't a movie that is chiefly about the 20th century. Do you know what I mean?
Okay, yeah.
Because it is about this conflict. It's about appealing to, you know, an international idea of fighting against tyranny, which I think that we have swallowed, digested, it's gone through, it's come out the other side. That's become so much a part of our discourse that we don't even question it now. So could you take this and say, set it in one of the many areas around the world that are Casablancas right now? You know, there are very many places in the third world where there are people like the Nazis who are killing people, who are controlling things, and there are areas of refugees who are from all different walks of life, you know, who have to survive. And could you do a Casablanca with brown people? I don't know how else to say it. And either just recreate it or improve on it. That's if somebody did a remake, that's what I'd like to see.
I'm sure. I mean, that probably also just exists as not a remake, you know, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah, it probably is out there.
But yeah, totally. You could, if you wanted to remake it like that. I think that can happen. I think that's the movie is universal in that way.
Well, it's time. Let's talk about Star Trek doing a Casablanca when we come back from this.
Hi, I'm Mikan Hana.
And I'm Caliban.
And we're the hosts of the Sailor Noob podcast. I'm the expert.
And I'm the noob.
You're talking into the wrong end of the microphone.
Aye.
Okay, every week we watch a new episode of Sailor Moon and learn about monsters, fashion, food, culture, and of course, the sailor warrior of love and justice, Sailor Moon.
All right, now, what is her rank? Is she an admiral or a rear admiral?
Okay, shh. The ad's almost over. We're a couple of magical people, and every week we Moon Prism Power make up a new episode.
Better midships. Steady as she goes.
Please stop that. Sailor Noob is available every Friday on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Shiver me timbers. All right, we're back. We are talking about the episode that you selected, listeners, our Twitter listeners and followers, to vote on a poll of different episodes from each one of the sort of Trek series that were released in the 80s and 90s. And we chose this one. We'll always have Paris, a TNG episode.
On the next episode of Star Trek, The Next Generation.
2 to beam directly up to sickbay.
A mission to save a dying scientist uncovers a deadly time experiment.
Captain, it must be stopped.
And reunites the captain with his first love.
We need your help. The situation is not good.
No, they must save the galaxy from this crippling time distortion.
Only one of us is in the correct time continuum.
On Star Trek, The Next Generation.
Which is closely related to Casablanca. So glad I got to see Casablanca. This TNG episode, it's okay. It's all right.
Yeah, no, I actually I enjoy this episode. It's not a classic. It's not amazing. There are elements to it that are really cool, but yeah, it's okay.
Yeah. Well, we'll hear more about that in a little bit. It was released on May 2nd of 1988. It's the 24th episode of the first season. So this is that point where, everybody knows that the first season of a lot of Trek shows, especially TNG, was kind of rocky. But it's also in the kind of back nine. And so you get like a level of polish to the production, but you also get parts that are like, that's weird. They're going to drop that. You won't see that in like future seasons of the show. And yeah, there are little hiccups and weird, goofy things. But we'll definitely talk about that as we go. Just as far as the synopsis goes, it's similar superficially to Casablanca, but there are, of course, departures. Captain Picard gets a call that they got to go check this thing out. And it's his ex-girlfriend living on a planet with her husband, who's a scientist, and they're experimenting with time, causing things to go wrong. And Picard has an unrequited thing with her that relates specifically in this episode to Paris. The reference, of course, being the line, "We'll always have Paris," given from Elsa to Rick in Casablanca. Yada, yada, yada. 3 datas solve the problem, and then we resolve our emotional problems, and then we go for a drink at the Blue Parrot at the end of the episode. A reference, of course, to Casablanca.
Of course. Clever.
Get it in there right at the end. Did you like the classic boop, 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 ba-doop, boop, boop, like the goofy music ending where somebody tells a joke and then we just go out to the credits?
You're buying. Like, that
You're
joke
buying.
isn't even great. Yeah, like, it's...
Buying what? Nobody's got money.
That's all that I could think about, yeah. So it's not clean as like Casablanca is from like a story perspective. It is like 3 very loose elements that relate happening at once, I feel like, but
yeah,
it's I think each individual thread in this episode is kind of interesting on its own, though. So I was enjoying, Data obviously solving the problem. That was fun to watch. The scientist freaking out was fun to watch, and I liked Picard's Casablanca moments with his ex. So
it's funny that this show, and you get a lot of this, Star Trek at this point, I don't think knew what to do with emotion. There's a distancing effect that I talk about a lot and that I like, where our heroes in Star Trek are weird. Like if you drop them into a McDonald's, in 2019, they wouldn't fit in. And I kind of like watching people like that. And then I bemoan when we get to Discovery and people are like, man, I sure love Prince. It's like, no, don't be that cool. You're supposed to be like dorks. And part of that is part of that is like this weird approach or expression of emotion that you get. And it's funny that like, it's very important that Picard show emotion, even though he's a stoic figure, he has to show emotion that the audience can see. So it'll prompt Troy to go, I think you're feeling emotions. And he does it by like, he's whacking this towel into his lap, like while he's like giving orders or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And it's so clunky and so strange. Meanwhile, you've got a movie like Casablanca that is so subtle in the writing and the performance that you literally need a character to go, whoa, well, look what Rick's doing, to point out, just in case the audience misses how smooth and subtle like the emotions and the acting is. And so, like, yeah, you get an episode that's all about emotion, and yet Troy has to come out and say, you're jealous of the lady from Mamas and the Papas, aren't you? And then you've got like you've got a weird scene where the lovers finally confront each other, and they're doing this like, maybe I'll come on Tuesday. No, it's raining. Are you like what?
Oh yeah, it's like oh, what? You want me to lie to me? Yes, lie to me. And then he lies.
Oh, okay, I'm going to lie. Yeah.
And he's like, come on, now out with the truth. I actually liked all that, so I don't even know. Like, I thought it was...
It's so melodramatic, though. Maybe after watching Casablanca, I just wasn't, like, set up for it.
Yeah, I think for me, what this is so weird, but like what made it work for me was that I had watched it earlier this year for a different podcast, and I didn't compare it to that. And so when I was rewatching it, I was just like remembering that all the stuff I liked about it the first time around, and it still held up for me. I liked the chemistry between Picard and his ex there, and I used to think that little acting in the beginning was subtle, but I guess maybe having Troy point it out is not subtle. But
yeah,
I think it's Patrick Stewart. If it was anybody but Patrick Stewart, it would not.
Oh no, he makes it as subtle as he can, and he does a pretty good job. It's funny that people always complain, and I think it's true, that the idea of Troy is a great character in her role on the ship. She finally gets to do it twice on this episode, but it's so clunky, like she has to like basically say, "Captain, I saw you smacking your towel," and then later it's in service of this dumb plot line that they need to drop, that anytime anybody makes eyes at Picard, Beverly has a conniption about it, and so she has to go to her.
Yeah.
But then Beverly's like, look, I know they don't write me this way, but I'm a professional and I can take care of it. And so that doesn't even really go anywhere either.
Yeah, that didn't work. It does this thing that I think later Star Trek gets good about, where, they give you these little character moments because it's this ensemble. And, we get a bunch of fun Data moments in other episodes that aren't about him, and it adds to the character, and it's like, oh, wow. But, like, in the first season, there's a lot of just, like, by the way, I'm an android, and,
yeah.
And so, it makes it messy.
For me, it's the difference between, here's two first season examples. There's this where he closes the thing, he saves the day, and then they're like, you closed it. And it's like, well, it's not closed, blah, blah, blah. They're like, okay, whatever. And then there's something like when in The Big Goodbye, the guy gets shot and they're like, Data, we need some light over here. So he goes and picks up the lamp, the 20th century lamp, and carries it over. The plug comes out of the wall and he's like, why'd the light go off? And then he goes over and he starts to fuss with it again. And it's just, that's
good stuff, actually.
Yeah, because it's organic, we take what we know about him, we put him in a situation, and we don't point out the problem that he's having because of his nature. Like, that's better writing.
Oh, totally. That moment where he solves it in the end, speaking of, like, it's weird because I don't understand what he did.
I don't either. I think it's iconic too. It's like, if you're going to put a sizzle reel together of the first season, like, you put this in, but I have no idea what happened.
But at the same time, also just watching it was like, it reminds me of where No One Has Gone Before, which you talked about recently on your other podcast, plug there. But where it's like, maybe it's not perfect, but just watching it, like, and like what is happening to them in both these episodes, where they're experiencing this crazy sci-fi stuff, where I'm just like, whoa, like,
yeah.
I'm kind of a sucker for it. I'm just like, this is crazy, so I just like eat it up.
I don't know about the structure. This episode was written by two writers who have written other episodes of the show, but the structure of it is so just sort of chunky and weird, in my opinion. Like, we set up a problem. Oh, and first of all, here's a trope for you. This old scientist has a hot wife, and they live in the middle of nowhere. Never seen that on Star Trek before. We set that up. We set up that there's this problem. She's a former lover of Picard, and then the episode kind of drains away, and I don't really know where it goes. Like, we know there's a problem in the lab. We send Data down. I always love when they show Data doing like superhero things, like he's dodging lasers and things like that.
Yeah, and it's very like stagey or like yeah.
And then he goes to the lab. He gets through the fluorescent bulb door, and then he's in the time lab. And then we go to commercial, and it comes back from commercial. He's still in the time lab. He puts the lime in the coconut. We're all good there. And then we have the parting scene in the holodeck Paris. And then it's like, we're still not done. Well, we got more seconds left. Let's do the you're buying.
Yeah.
And there's just no real for some reason, the whole thing with the scientist, their problems, it should all come back and tie together in the end, like Casablanca does. If you're going to do a Casablanca,
that's exactly what I was thinking. Like his decision in the end of Casablanca, like it ties up both him as the cynic who's now turned good, and it also is like a bow on his romance. Whereas like it's just a weird coincidence that they're helping the scientist who Picard used to date his wife, and that's a thing that happens sometimes, but it's just weird that it didn't tie into me. It wasn't satisfying at all.
This is the problem with telling stories in the Star Trek universe, which we've been talking about all day, so I know what I'm talking about, is that if your people are really good, you can't do a thing like Rick's going to sell this guy out to the Nazis. You'll never believe that Picard could act in his own self-interest. Say that the scientist's life is on the line. We could solve the problem, but I don't know, we got to throw the guy in the hole or something. You would never believe that he would do that. You don't have a situation like that. In fact, later on in the show, we get a situation where Picard is dating, a woman that he has to put in danger, and he ends their relationship because he's like, I can't be placed in a position like that where I need to make a decision whether you live or die, and it's about you and not about my crew. And so it can never rise up to Casablanca because you just can't ever that's why they have Data running around on his own. You can't ever make that situation happen on a Trek show. At least not this Trek show.
Right. It doesn't even have to be like, I don't know. It didn't even have to be with him either. Like, I think what bothers me is that it felt like they wanted to have their cake and eat it too a little bit, because when he talks to the scientist, he does have a line about like, you don't take her for granted. I sure did. And it's like, oh, maybe she's going to maybe she'll do something cool in the mission. I don't know. And then it's like, no, she tells Data where to go, I think, but that's about it. Like maybe that would have been cool. Like she gets in on the mission. Like, maybe she has her own.
I think they were just excited to have Michelle Phillips, who's pretty good. You put her up against Patrick Stewart. I mean, anybody's going to look bad, but she's good for what she does.
Yeah, no, like I said, I loved their nonsensical banter. I loved their chemistry. It really sold it for me.
Did you like the weird husband, the German scientist? He's like, I can't hold it all in my head.
That is one of my that's my favorite moment of the episode, actually, is when he is just freaking out about his mind being between dimensions, because it's one of those things that it's not sold on like special effects or anything. We just have to like take this guy's word for it.
Yeah, because we can't afford. We did the Paris cafe scene. We can't afford anything else.
And so I just love that, because it's like he's definitely over the top, but I was sold on it. I was like, this is crazy. What's happening to this guy right now?
I guess they were burning daylight earlier too, because Troy goes, "Hey, you need to work this out." And something that I always complain that we don't see, but on the show on Enterprising Individuals, but I guess I forgot this episode. He goes to the holodeck specifically to confront this problem that he has. He makes the recreation of the cafe de whatever artistes, and so he does that. So my question is, is the holodeck set to therapeutic mode? Because it gets the waiter's real chatty. He's like, oh, maybe you're waiting for a lady, and then he sits down.
The lady to have the conversation.
Yeah, and the two women are like, I wonder if he'll come. It's like, wait a minute, how much of his file have you read, computer?
That was I don't even want to like figure out how that happened. I just love that.
Well, it's better than talking to a pigeon, I guess. But I also want to point out that at this point, William Ware Teese was still costuming for the show, and it shows, because that woman is like that's beach wear. Like she's almost naked that he's talking to.
Yeah, that was an intense costume. He has a moment in that holodeck scene that's just like what you're saying, where like they tell you, instead of just trusting Patrick Stewart's incredible acting, he has to be like, enough with this silly,
fake silly thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, okay. There's something very like, I think maybe it's just like the nature of a lot of Star Trek where because of, it's something I like sometimes too, because it's good at like catching you up when they come back from break if you miss something.
Oh yeah.
But where they're just like, it's very wrestling. They just like have to like over exaggerate everything and like be like, this is how you should feel.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I wouldn't compare Star Trek to wrestling unless it was the episode Tsunkatse and Voyager. But since you like both, I guess I understand why you like this a little more.
There's a fine line that I could connect, but we don't have time.
I think that this is the first time we see fencing on the show. I think where we established that. Maybe there's an earlier. I don't know. This is an Enterprise.
I think
individuals.
that's
I don't
it,
care.
yeah.
But I did love the rainbow foils. You know, it's future if you put like a hologram trim over everything. So his foil has like the rainbow hologram trim, which I thought was cute.
Beautiful.
It's a very fancy foil for the future. Anything else you can think of to mention about this episode?
Cafe des Artistes or whatever it feels, maybe it's a real place, but it felt very much like, what's a French cafe name? Like they pulled it out of a hat a little bit.
You think so?
I don't know. It just felt very like, I don't know.
They can't seem to be endorsing anything, right? So they have to make something up. But
sure,
I guess that was plausible. I love the see-through menus of the future.
Ooh, the guy playing the pipes. That's crucial.
Yeah,
that was crucial.
We do see somebody. You know, we never see like a lot of civilian communication, but we see somebody talking to somebody on a video phone, and instead of putting like a monitor up, we wanted flat screens even back then, so they're doing like a projection thing, so it looks like a clear flat screen. I thought that was pretty cool. There's we see future Paris, and I always wondered like, what do you do with historic sites in the future? Like, do you have just like super tall future skyscrapers, and you have the dinky little Eiffel Tower there? And we kind of get an answer because there's like a huge tube like running through the middle. Maybe it's down the Champ de Mars or something like the middle of the Eiffel Tower. And I don't know if it's like transit or if it's like moving water or something like that. But it seems like they've left Paris mostly alone. I mean, there's still crappy little cafes.
Well, that's important, I think, to have those.
Apparently, former guest on the show, Larry Nemchek, wrote a book called The Star Trek The Next Generation Companion, and he zoomed in on the menu during that scene, with HD remaster, and there are items like the croissant de lithium on the menu, Klingon targ à la mode, tribbles dans la blanquette, and l'antimatter flambé.
Okay, those are fun tidbits. I love when they do those.
You can't do that anymore though, because everybody's got 4K TV.
Yeah, now it's like when the movie or TV show comes out, it's like, here's all the Easter eggs that.
Yeah, right,
like,
right.
They anticipate that stuff. So
yeah,
these are the genuine organic Easter eggs.
Something else. My last thing I'll say before we move on to our technological exchange is that it's hard to live up to the heroism of people fighting the Nazis in World War II. But I wish that Mannheim's work meant a little more, because at the end of the episode, they've gotten everybody they work with killed, and they get back together, and Picard's like, she's important. Don't appreciate her. And he's like, honey, I think I want to go fuck with time again. And she's like, okay, let's do it. Like there's no implication that what they're doing is going to kill or cure the Venezian flu, or is going to be really important for some reason. He's just messing with time.
I forgot about that from the last time I watched it because I was so focused in on it. But it feels like he faces no consequences, and he just says, it'll be different this time.
It'll be different. Like, that's what every wife wants to hear, yeah.
That'd been cool if they played it like it was a dark ending, like he's going back to it.
It'll be different this time.
Yeah, no, that's weird. Yeah, that's the season 1, non-polished there, I guess.
What's the most successful gloss on Casablanca? Like, who did it and also created like the best, of their TV show or their whatever?
Oh, I don't know.
Barbed Wire. We already answered the question. So anyway.
Barbed Wire. I think Looney Tunes, I'll say. They've I'm sure that's been referenced. That's how I know it.
Must have. Or The Simpsons. How did they do it?
Yep, there you go. That's it.
Well, let's move on to our technological exchange.
Yes.
Technology is important, period. Thank you, Dr. Steve Brule. But also, it's important in war, and so whoever has the best technology usually wins. In the future, they've got technology as well, but we're going to take some of it away. We're going to roll on our table of technologies enjoyed by the people in Star Trek, add it to Casablanca, and subtract it from this episode. Here's our list of Star Trek technologies. 10 things. We got phasers, holodecks, tricorders, transporters, warp drive, replicators, communicators, shields, the advanced medical technology, and androids. I'm going to roll on the actual D10 die. And our result is number 9, advanced medical technology. If we took... Or excuse me, if we added advanced medical technology to Casablanca, what would we get?
Well, no. Is anyone ever truly in danger in this? Well,
first
I
of
guess
all,
if it's
Major Strassa would be rolling over on Rick the second they got him back up on his feet in the hospital.
That's true. Yeah, I was thinking like I was thinking about it in context of the movie, but we're also talking about like the world.
Oh, just mean like
the
entirety of World War II. JFK, FDR would be walking around.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think that if we had advanced medical technology, a lot of issues in the world, not everything, but a lot would be solved, and so maybe this would prevent a lot of the need for a lot of the fighting that was happening. Of course, not everything, but I think, these characters maybe would be a little bit more well off in general.
Whose hands would it be in?
Oh, that's a good question.
Because if the Nazis, are in control and they have the money and the technology, then they've got advanced medical technology. Their soldiers and stormtroopers are nearly invincible, and, the resistance fighters, they wouldn't have it. Or maybe they'd be fighting over it. Maybe Rick would be smuggling bio beds, and hyposprays into war areas instead of guns.
That just, my mind went to, I want to see now a Casablanca type movie set in the universe of that Overlord movie that came out like last year, where it was like, mutated Nazi, monsters.
I was thinking about that too. I was thinking about that movie.
Get some Nazi zombies in this movie.
Oh no! Oh, you're thinking about the perversion of the technology. Oh my goodness!
Yeah, exactly. I'm saying you get, maybe they get advanced medical technology, but
it'd be a real Wolfenstein situation.
Exactly, Wolfenstein. And this time, maybe they don't understand it. Maybe things go wrong.
Ugh.
I think this would be good for what's the low IQ Canadian's name again?
Let's not.
I think you might like this.
Never say his name again. I was actually thinking about Overlord. I don't know why. Maybe because it's World War II, but I was thinking about it in connection with Casablanca, and I was thinking about how perfect Casablanca is in terms of its pacing. It is, first of all, there are movies that, and I think that you and I were kind of saying this in the earlier segment, that you don't have to, the movie doesn't have to be running on rails the entire time. Like, I also enjoy a lot of movies where things kind of stop and start, and there are low points. And Casablanca is almost afraid to let it down. It's something is always happening in that movie, but it all works and it's all done because of the tension and because of the great cracking dialogue. Whereas Overlord has good points, but it is paced exactly by the rules of Hollywood. Like, something happens when it's supposed to, whether or not it's a good time or not. And if I had to criticize Casablanca, I'd say that when the romance and the melodrama takes over, and again, I don't think of myself as like loving romance movies, but you really get caught up in it because you understand these characters. That middle part of the movie is a little punchy, maybe. It's a little fat in the middle, because now instead of cracking dialogue and the threat of Nazis, it's just, are these people going to work their emotions out? You would never, if you made that movie today, or the people that made Overlord made that movie, there'd have to be an explosion somewhere. Like, we get that suggestion of Laszlo and Carl come back from the resistance meeting and Laszlo's hurt his arm. We would have seen that whole scene. We would see the Nazis break up the resistance meeting, Carl would bonk somebody on the head with a frying pan. Laszlo would like shoot a guy, and we would have a chase, where they come out of that. And Casablanca's like, you get it, we don't have to do that. But in a modern movie, they would have done that for sure.
Yeah, that's like 90% of movies.
Laszlo
right?
would have been able to easily fix his arm where he got cut if they had advanced medical technology.
Oh boy.
Okay, what if
I like Overlord, by the way. I'll stick up for it.
I wanted to like it more than I did. I like it mostly for Wyatt. What's his name? What is his name? Kurt Russell's Wyatt Russell. Kurt Russell's kid.
Oh yeah, he's good.
I love him.
But your criticism is totally valid. I agree with that, but I still enjoy it. So. And
I love after he injects himself with the dark super soldier stuff, so he can fight back against Pilo Asbec's character, and he's like, "What do you think now that you have the super soldier thing? How does it feel?" And he's like, "Not fucking great." Yes. Right.
Yeah, good.
If we took medical technology away from this episode, what would we have? First of all, no Captain Picard. He'd be dead because he got stabbed in the heart.
Yeah, let's go through each character's individual backstory. Worf would have probably died at a Khitomer massacre.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. Geordi would be blind.
The doctor would definitely. I don't know. He'd probably.
It's never clear what
unfucked.
Yeah, it's never clear what's happening to him, but we are led to believe that he is. She basically says, "I can do nothing for him."
Okay, so Crusher, she already couldn't do much for him. Her character is not great in this episode. Could that have fixed it? I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Every medical aspect of this episode is not good.
Yeah,
I think. Like,
maybe
I wish the doctor wasn't in it.
Well, then she wouldn't exist. It would make the episode better. Yeah, we wouldn't have that little side thing with her and Troy. I don't have any answers, so I'm going to say something else. This episode kind of reminds me of The Alternative Factor. You ever see that episode from the original series?
What happens to that one? I'm sure
it is well known as like one of the worst episodes of TOS. I think it's from the first season, and a character named Lazarus is this guy from like another dimension, and he's like caught between dimensions, and there's just a lot of gobbledygook about how he's got to get back to his own dimension. Yeah, and it's basically like the good guest stars are when somebody comes in, a Ronnie Cox in Chain of Command, or the woman that plays Sati in The Drumhead. When they come in, they shake everything up, and then they can't stay. We have to get rid of that character because they'll change the show too much. Not when they come in like Lazarus and make it a different show. So now like Kirk and Spock are running around and they're just following him and going like, what's happening now? You don't understand the dimensions, the thing. I have some thing that you've never heard of and I must get it to the other thing that nobody's ever heard of. And once I do, I'll be gone. That's not like a great way to do a show.
Yeah, it's very, I don't know. It's just like maybe it's too magic. I don't know.
Yeah. And that's not,
but I like them. I don't know. I like the magic.
That's not really what happens here. I do think that we could have dug more into, Picard and his history, with, I don't remember her character's name, with Michelle Williams.
Yeah, I don't know either.
But, again, it's like I said, I mean, if they're fundamentally good 24th century people, I don't think that you're going to see him do anything bad, which is, I think, what you need to make this work. Did we do the medical technology thing yet?
Yeah.
Are we done yet?
I feel like we always get the worst ones with these. Like,
no, we've had some great ones in the past.
Well, not always, but, like, what if they took planes out of Casablanca and put them in Star Trek? Now that's what.
Oh, you want to go the other way? We got to do that in the future.
Yeah.
What if we landed on androids? The entire universe would have blown up.
Yeah, see, that would have if one of the characters was an android, that would have been a good twist.
Oh, in Casablanca, yeah.
If Casablanca became a sci-fi movie.
In Star Trek, you'd have to, barbed wire. In Star Trek, you'd have to, I love that scene where Picard's like, well, we're going to send you, Data, because we don't want to sacrifice any of the crew. And Data's like, yeah, that makes sense. And then Picard kind of walks it back, like, no, you're important too. But I think
because he says, "Oh, I'm expendable," right?
It's a very first season view of data. This is pre-Measure of a Man view of Data, which I don't think that they were necessarily thinking about it in terms of a continuity, but when you see the realizations that he has about how they treat Data in that episode, this makes a little more sense. Like, it's like, yeah, why wouldn't you just send the guy who isn't real? But if we didn't have him, they'd have to send a full team. And so whoever they send, scratch one off for one laser cannon, scratch one off for the next laser cannon. Another guy gets fried in the door. They have to sacrifice some people when closing the portal thing. Anyway, I guess we slipped over into androids, but
nope, that's a good addition, I think.
All
right. When you mentioned Picard's backstory there with I don't remember her name either, but when you mentioned it,
Mrs. Mannheim,
it at least, there is a kernel that's left here that is worthwhile, in that, like, when Picard was younger, he was very different, and he didn't always make the right choices that people associate him with. So that's cool. That I think that this, and maybe his past with, like, no, I think this is probably one of the best early examples of that. So, and I'll give it credit where it's due.
You get a similar thing too, where he runs out. He's the Ilsa in this case, because she wants them to be together. He wants an amazing life, and he gets it, but she also ends up with somebody who himself is dedicated to his work and to doing something amazing. And so you understand why she was attracted to him. Picard's path took him away from her, but she finds somebody similar. And then we get that is a nice moment at the end where he's like, I don't want to be weird, but I've been where you are, make sure that you also are committed to her as you're sort of doing what you do.
Yeah, but they don't really pay it off with her in the end. He just goes, "It'll be better." Like, it would almost, I don't know what, I don't want her to necessarily be
change.
Like, yeah. It's like, he doesn't have to make all the right choices, but give it some kind of finality there.
Yeah, advanced medical technology. So anyway, I think we've said enough, or at least we've said what we can. I still would like to talk more about Casablanca in the future.
We'll find a reason, right?
We'll find a way to do it, for sure. Should we tell people what's coming up on next week's BackTrekking?
Okay, so for the next episode, we are talking about the TOS classic episode Arena.
Yes.
And the short story Arena that inspired it.
Maybe.
I know nothing about this. So.
Kind of. Actually, it was a situation where the writer, Frederick Brown, was given credit because of the incredible similarities between the two plots. And
this could be a reoccurring theme.
Yes, we'll get into the ins and outs of it as we do the episode next week. It's also like it's a very basic idea, like two beings fighting, but it's something that has also been repeated in other medias. There's an Outer Limits episode that's very much like it. There's a Blake 7 episode that's very much like it. So, yeah.
Well, it's one of my favorite genres of things, is two people fighting. So
Me too. That's why you have a wrestling podcast.
Exactly.
That's it for this week's BackTrekking. Thanks for listening. And if you like the show, please tell a friend. It's really the best way I can think of to get the word out there about us. Also, following us on Twitter would be a good idea at BackTrekking, TrekKing. We have a Discord as well. There's a link in the show notes. Come join us on the Just Enough Trope Discord, because we're talking about all kinds of stuff. Also, Star Trek and sci-fi as well. So join us for that. Gooey, tell people where they can find you online.
All right, you can find me on Twitter. My name is @GooeyFame.
Right before this, Gooey and I recorded an episode of my other Star Trek show called Enterprising Individuals. You can find that on Twitter at EISTPOD. And that's it for us. We'll see you soon. And until then, keep on trekking.